and good evening. Welcome to World Today, a show where we get you all the updates from around the globe, all the major stories that are happening everywhere in every corner of the world. I'm Gautam Roy, and today we're talking specifically about and extensively about Prime Minister Narendra Modi's now trip to two significant destinations for two specific events. One is the G20 Summit in Italy, in Rome, and the other to the United Kingdom in Glasgow, where COP26, a major climate conference of the world, really, leaders from several countries will be coming there, will be starting at the end of this month. But first, our headlines. Prime Minister Narendra Modi to embark on a 5-day visit to Italy and United Kingdom tonight. He will attend the 16th G20 Summit and the World Leaders Summit of COP26. Several bilateral meetings are scheduled, including with the Prime Minister of Italy and the Pope on the sidelines. Prime Minister Modi attends 18th ASEAN India Summit virtually, says the unity and centrality of ASEAN is of prime importance to India. At least 10 people killed in firing by soldiers on pro-democracy protesters opposing military rule in Sudan. World Bank suspends aid to the country following the military coup there. And in sports and football, Liverpool secure their place in the quarter-final round of the ongoing EFL Cup. Second half goals from Takumi Minamino and Divock Origi play a big push for the Reds. And let's start with the big news of today's World Today. Well, two major multilateral events are set to unfold over the next few days in India, with Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be in the thick of things there. The PM is first travelling to Rome starting tonight to take part in the G20 Summit, the most powerful grouping in the world, covering 80% of global GDP and 60% of the world's population. He will then travel to Glasgow in the United Kingdom to take part in the Leaders Summit at COP26, the global climate conference determining the world's response and action to climate change gauntlet. Here's more.
The G20 Leaders Summit will take place on 30th and 31st of October in Italy. The G20 leaders are expected to deliberate on a number of key challenges, such as recovering from the coronavirus pandemic, overcoming poverty and inequality, and security situation in various parts of the world. The situation in Afghanistan is also expected to figure prominently. The forthcoming summit will be centered around the theme People, Planet, Prosperity, focusing on areas of recovery from the pandemic and strengthening of global health governance. It will also focus on economic recovery and resilience, and energy transition and sustainable development, and food security. However, as leaders of the world's biggest economies gather in Rome for the G20, greater focus is likely to be on climate crisis facing the world. The next COP26 meeting is taking place in Glasgow, UK, days after the G20 summit.
Prime Minister will be in Rome, Italy from the 29th to the 31st of October. He'll reach Rome on 29th morning and he'll depart Rome on the evening of 31st October for Glasgow. He would be in Rome to attend the G20 summit at the invitation of the Prime Minister of Italy, His Excellency Mr. Mario Draghi. This would be Prime Minister's 8th G20 summit. He has already participated in 7 G20 summits before this. You are aware that the summit last year, hosted by Saudi Arabia, was held virtually because of the COVID-19 pandemic. The last in-person summit that the Prime Minister had attended was in Osaka in June 2019. The Prime Minister will also have several bilateral meetings on the sidelines of COP26, including in Italy with the Prime Minister of Italy, who is the host of G20, and at COP26 with the Prime Minister of the UK, who is the host of the COP26. He will also, Prime Minister will be calling on His Holiness Pope Francis at the Vatican when he's in Rome. He, as I mentioned, will be meeting several other world leaders. Keep in mind, of course, that beyond the bilateral meetings that we are scheduling, this is work in progress. As a founding member of the G20, India has always been a proactive and positive player in its processes, speaking not only for itself, but also for the larger developing world. We are one of the few developing countries that are a part of the G20. We have strongly advocated the full implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the Addis Ababa Action Agenda, and the Paris Agreement, among other international commitments.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson said on Wednesday that the outcome of the COP26 United Nations Climate Conference is in the balance. He described the summit as both important for the planet and a very difficult negotiation.
It is, of course, correct, Mr. Speaker, that COP26 is both unbelievably important for our planet, but also very difficult. And it's in the balance, Mr. Speaker. And he's right in what he says about the need to keep 1.5 degrees alive, and that will be, and it does depend on what happens this decade. It depends on the commitments that are made. All I will say, Mr. Speaker, is that already very substantial commitments under the UK presidency designate of COP have been achieved, and we've moved from only 30% of the global economy committed to a net zero by the middle of the century to now 80%. And every day as I talk to international leaders, we hear further commitments to make those solid commitments that the world will need. Whether it is enough, Mr. Speaker, I'm afraid it is too early to say.
United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres urged the world leaders to avoid the climate catastrophe.
Less than 1 week before COP26 in Glasgow, we are still on track for climate catastrophe, even with the last announcements that were made. The 2021 emissions gap report shows that with the present nationally determined contributions and other firm commitments of countries around the world, we are indeed on track for a catastrophic global temperature rise of around 2.7 degrees Celsius. If there is no meaningful reduction of emissions in the next decade, we will have lost forever the possibility of reaching 1.5 degrees.
World leaders are all set to meet at the G20 summit and later at COP26 climate summit to try to commit to a more ambitious climate pledge. The G20 has emerged as the premier global forum for international economic cooperation. It is the international forum that brings together the world's major economies. Its members account for more than 80% of the world's GDP, 75% of global trade, and 60% of the population of the planet. World Today Desk, DD India.
So very, very key events, two of them taking place, and the Prime Minister will be right there representing India and speaking in a larger voice, in fact, that would be heard clearly across the world and would represent more than India does. It will represent other developing countries as well. Let's just look at what the agenda is likely to be as far as G20 is concerned, when India is backing the theme chosen by Italy as President for G20 Meet 2021. Let's tell you what the theme is. The theme is People, Planet, Prosperity. It stems from something that the UN has already determined earlier. Now, India backs Italy's agenda for the summit's meet. What is Italy's agenda? Well, it's recovery from the pandemic. That's the first thing. Then it's strengthening global health governance, because that is again key to tackling pandemics of the future as well. Economic recovery and resilience is, of course, part of it. There's climate change and energy transition, again, very, very crucial. And there's sustainable development as well as food security. Now, India is strongly advocating support for equitable and affordable access to COVID control tools. COVID control tools include vaccines, therapeutics, and diagnostics. This support includes through technology transfer, diversification of supply chains, and production hubs as well. India's efforts have led G20 to recognize extensive vaccination as global public good. That's a singular contribution that India has done. This will make strong case, India will make a strong case to strengthen WHO-led global health governance architecture as well. It has also supported ongoing efforts to create mechanisms for pandemic prevention, preparedness, and response. Now, these measures include mobilization of global financing for pandemic prevention, preparedness and response as well. India has also supported Debt Service Suspension Initiative, which is DSSI, till December 2021. Now, DSSI is a direct outcome of the 15th G20 summit, and again it was something that India had really initiated. More than 45 countries, in fact, have been provided with liquidity relief of over $5 billion because of DSSI. It's helped countries to manage socio-economic impact of the pandemic, and these are the vulnerable, poorer countries. Now, India also chairs G20 Framework Working Group formulating its response, that is economic response to the pandemic. Now, the work has ensured there advanced economies take into account spillovers of domestic policy actions that could impact, more vulnerable countries. It's also ensured no premature withdrawal of support to most vulnerable sections of societies. Now, India has also used G20 platform to improve tax transparency. So all these tax related issues of evasion, avoidance, round tripping, everything that's been tackled to a large extent through the G20 forum by India's pushing. Now, global minimum tax deal has been reached because of India's efforts alone. Now, this will benefit India by tackling shifting of businesses to lower tax jurisdictions. That used to happen a lot. Now, that will not happen to that extent. Now, PM is also likely to present India's perspective to combat key global challenges from COVID, economic recovery, terrorism to climate change. Afghanistan, of course, thrown in as well. The PM is also likely to call for a united approach to deal with the Afghanistan situation, the pandemic and climate change. The PM is meeting Italian Prime Minister Mario Draghi and also calling on the Pope at the Vatican. That was mentioned by the Foreign Secretary as well just a short while back in that report that we showed you. Now, let's talk about COP26. What's India's agenda there? Well, the main contention will remain transfer of technology and climate finance from developed countries. Now, this is likely to seek a commitment of 100 billion plus US dollars. This is the annual climate finance commitment from developed nations. So far, the developed nations have been failing to meet the $100 billion target since 2009 and are unlikely to meet it till 2023. Now, India is also expected to push for climate justice and equity and contributions based on historical responsibility. India will also negotiate with similar stand as 24 like-minded developing countries. It's also called LMDCs, including China. India is ahead of NDC, the nationally determined contributions, that is targets, and may use enhanced targets during negotiations for better outcomes for developing countries. India to help finalize Paris rule book to operationalize the Paris Agreement of 2015. See, that is still hanging fire. And India to play key role in negotiations of funding for loss and damage. This is again a core part of the Paris Agreement. There's no mechanism yet within UNFCCC to fund responses when vulnerable countries suffer. Loss and damage is viewed as a critical factor by LDCs to unlock negotiations, but it's being resisted by the richer countries. Prime Minister Modi and British counterpart Boris Johnson will also make a joint statement on Green Grids Initiative. Now, the Green Grids Initiative is about one sun, one world, one grids. That's a GGIOSOWOG. That's quite an abbreviation. Now, this initiative will bring technical, financial and research cooperation together. It will also facilitate cross-border renewable energy transfer projects involving the International Solar Alliance. So this will be a major move that India will make along with the UK and some other countries. Now, let's talk about what are the real priorities and what's likely to unfold. We have two guests to talk about it with us today. We're joined by S.R. Tayal, former Indian ambassador to the Republic of Korea, and R.R. Rashmi is also with us. She's Distinguished Fellow, Terry, and former Special Secretary, Ministry of Environment. Welcome to you both. First, to you, Mr. Tayal, what do you make of the prospects of how things are going to go as far as G20 summit is concerned, and then, of course, later on, what's going to happen in Glasgow? Will India achieve what it set out to achieve in terms of the kind of responses that it is seeking from the world on global challenges, and it's a wide range. The economy is still there, the response to pandemic is still there, there's climate change, there is terrorism in Afghanistan thrown in as well.
The G20 summit in Italy and the COP26 in Glasgow are very, very important because we all know that last year 2020 was lost because these summits could not take place. Even Saudi Arabia summit took place G20, but it was not physical, it was virtual. And we need to understand that these summits bring maximum value when the leaders are able to meet physically, they are able to meet informally, and they are able to really discuss going beyond their official positions. And unfortunately, in a virtual mode last year, that was not possible. Now, this year, all the economies are now coming out of the COVID pandemic in different ways. Yes, COVID pandemic has not gone, and the world leaders will appreciate and understand that it is not going to go away, and some kind of endemic kind of this COVID-19 would remain. So how the economies work together, the agenda has been set very clearly by the Italians that it should be people focused, and that is what India always says, that the policies, economic policies should not be profit focused, they should be focused on people. Then planet. Of course, there is a link with the Conference of Parties, COP26, and whatever decisions are taken by these 20 countries in G20 regarding climate change targets will have a very strong bearing on what will eventually happen in Glasgow, where the COP26 would follow. Because these 19 countries in the European Union, they have 80% of the GDP of the world, 75% of trade, and 60% of population. So in whatever are the agenda and targets for COP26, whether like the UN Secretary General says that the temperature target, that the reduction or it should be kept within 2 degrees, the rise in temperature from the pre-industrial era, and it should be reduced to 1.5 degrees. That is a very critical point. Then the issue of financing of green technologies and carbon markets, all these will perhaps be discussed in G20, and on whatever consensus is reached, that will have a great impact, great bearing on the issues in COP. But where India's interests are also very directly involved is Afghanistan.
Yes.
We have seen that around with the Taliban government, different countries are having their own positions. Central Asian countries, Russia, China, they are more inclined to start economic cooperation with Afghanistan. And our Prime Minister and the global requirement is that all the countries should come together. They harmonize their positions and incentivize Taliban so that they adhere to whatever promises they have made regarding human rights, women, inclusive government in Doha, as well as in bilateral discussions with different countries. It is very important, but again, the G20 countries represent really the bulk of global economy. And if there is some kind of harmonization of views there, it will have a great bearing on the future direction of Afghanistan. So agenda is very, very heavy, very strong, and of great concern to India. And India has articulated its positions very clearly, and G20 will be a forum to take it forward.
Yes. Let me bring in Rashmi, and then we'll come back to G20 again. Rashmi, in terms of how things are shaping up, I'm not sure if you heard Boris Johnson there in the UK Parliament, but he was saying that the great thing is that a lot of these countries, he said earlier it was 30%, the countries who had said that they will commit to a net zero, now it's 80%, but he was still not confident that, you know, COP26 will have some concrete positive outcomes. He said things are hanging in balance. So what do you make of that?
See, net zero is
I was asking the other guest.
I think about 70-80 countries have also...
Mr. Tahir, I was asking the other guest.
Net zero carbon emissions by 2050. China has committed for 2060. But India in its present position and development track cannot give a firm date for net zero emission, but what our Prime Minister is saying that look at what we are doing. We have a target of 450 gigawatt of renewable energy. Look at International Solar Alliance. We have a very major program for electrical vehicles. So India is fully in tune with the global targets, but the world should look at India and judge from the actions being taken by India and support India, like green hydrogen. There is a whole new technology which can come, and it requires investments. Investments would be required at the $100 billion per year has also not been met. So to set targets for a developing country like India, which is 1.3 billion population, would not be fair and equitable, and India should be judged on its actions and commitment to stop climate change and be fully in tune and in harmony, work together with all the countries of the world
Yes.
to meet whatever global targets are set.
Yes. Let me bring in R.R. Rashmi now, distinguished fellow Terry and former Special Secretary to the Ministry of Environment. R.R. Rashmi, what do you make of the prospects of, COP26 now? India, of course, has its agenda set. It wants to press for more than $100 billion each year from the developed countries, which they've not been able to fulfill that commitment since 2009. And it's going to seek a ramp up on that. At the same time, there is, of course, loss and damage there. Carbon market is there. Setting the Paris rule book is another key priority area. Net zero is, of course, something that India has not committed on. But there is always the possibility of increasing the commitments.
Well, thank you very much. I'll come back to this question of the agenda in the COP26 and how it will play out. But to respond to the first question that you had put to me about the anxiety and dilemma which was
Yes.
evident in the statement of the British UK Prime Minister about the net zero commitments by 80% of the world's countries, and yet he was not sure of the COP being successful. The real issue here is that simply announcing net zero goal by the world leaders or by large number of countries is not going to do anything to reduce emissions by 2030. I mean, you see, a net zero goal by 2050 is certainly a commendable goal, and that is the ultimate decarbonization objective of the Paris Agreement, that we must all stabilize the climate at a particular level, below 2 degrees or below 1.5 degree. But the problem is that the current pledges and the current targets which are enshrined in the NDCs given by various countries, including those countries which have announced net zero goal, those emission reduction targets do nothing to stabilize the climate by 2030 to the extent required by science.
Right.
Science says that the world emissions must come down by 45% at least compared to 2010 levels by 2030. Now all the NDCs put together, including those countries which have announced net zero goals, just impact this emissions to the extent of only 11.6%.
Okay.
Only for their own emissions.
So that's what needs to be revised now in COP26. That has to be top of the agenda.
So that has to be at the top of the agenda, that by 2030, the NDCs which have been put out on the table must be substantially raised, and raised by those countries which are responsible for those emissions. And who is responsible? Not India and China. Because their emissions have started rising only in the last 30-40 years. Historically, the accumulation of the emissions which is responsible for climate change, that must be reduced. So that is a huge quantum of emissions, and nobody is talking about that. Everybody is talking about current emissions. Now currently, even if you include only current emissions, India is responsible for only 5%. So suppose India raises its target by current target of 35% emissions intensity reduction by another 10%, what impact it will make? It's just about even less than 1%, much less than 1%. So talk about net zero goal is not going to add much to value to this entire business of climate change effort unless the developed countries substantially raise their NDC targets by 2030. That was the first point.
Yes.
The second point is about the immediate deliverables in this COP26. There are several issues. You talked about climate finance, the carbon markets, and loss and damage and things like that. Now let me talk about climate finance. That is, of course, a very major issue. That in the absence of required investments, in the absence of global financial flows, the developing countries are really find it extremely difficult to enhance their climate change efforts, enhance their energy transition. Now, fortunately, India is in a different league. India has been pretty successful in meeting its energy targets so far. But the requirement of finance within India for making energy transition completely to decarbonize its energy system is extremely high, and that is not available entirely within the domestic financial system.
True.
We need international flows, but the issue is that the cost of this international capital flow is extremely high. When we talk about green investments, when we talk about people, planet, and prosperity, we need to take care of the people and the prosperity as well, and that is possible only if the cost of capital goes down, along with the flows of finance for climate change purposes.
And this can also be addressed at the G20 meet?
I think so, but I don't know whether this is on the agenda at all. I don't think climate finance is on the agenda. Climate change targets are certainly on the agenda. You talk the 1.5 degree goal is on the agenda, and 1.5 degree goal is a dicey goal because currently we have 2 degree goal, and that would require huge amount of emission reductions by developed countries, which they are not talking about. They are only making it related to the current emissions. But if the target is stiffened to 1.5 degree, it means in the future from 2020 to till 2050, the carbon budget will be further limited for developing countries, and then there will be huge impact on the prosperity, economic prosperity of these countries. So we cannot talk only about environmental targets. We must also talk about their impact on society and economy and bring down the cost of finance for green investments. That is an important issue. I hope the COP26 leaders are able to take the bull by horns. The other thing, some unresolved issues are the carbon market issues, Article 6 issues as they call it. There, it's certainly, I think, this COP should be able to resolve this issue. Unfortunately, the emphasis so far from the developed country partners has been on the reporting of these internationally traded emission reduction rights into the NDCs. Now, the developing countries don't see this linkage between the carbon market and the NDCs.
Okay.
They say that the whatever the emission reductions are traded internationally should also count towards the NDCs, which the developed countries don't want this to happen. So this is a stumbling block. I hope they are able to resolve this technical issue because carbon market is a very important financing instrument for developing countries, and this must kick off
in that context, Mr. Tahil, how important it is that this time around both G20 and COP26 is happening physically and top leaders will be there, although some of the top leaders have said that they are not going to attend. How much of that will be a factor, you know, some top leaders attending while some not?
It is a very big development because it facilitates interaction and facilitates decision making. We recall in Paris and in Copenhagen and several times when there were tricky issues, ultimately it was left to the president and prime ministers, and 4 or 5 they got together and came to some kind of an agreement. So when leaders are present physically, then the most intricate issues which experts do not have the mandate to relax whatever brief they have, the leaders can relax that brief and can be more accommodating. So it gives great hope. It gives great hope that there would be good results from both G20 summit and COP26. because the issues are intricate. Climate, that financing is a very, very important issue. One can set any target, but ultimately, if you want to meet the target, it requires money for new technologies, transfer of technology.
Yes.
There is one estimate that for energy, there are $600 billion a year is required if the world has to move away from fossil fuels and go towards solar or hydrogen or wind or whatever. So target setting is easy, but how do you reach those targets? That requires money, and all the economies are under strain because of the pandemic. Economies are not growing as fast as they want to. There are great discontentment among the populations of most democracies because the economy, there is unemployment, and so there are lots of interrelated issues.
There is inflation as well to boot.
Ultimately, if financing is to be done, it can be a very tough decision. We hope that these decisions will be taken first in G20 and then in COP26.
And as far as economies are concerned, the response to COVID-19 is again a very vital part where the G20 has already played a very important role. But, in terms of further opening up to each other, India has, of course, now been proposing reciprocity. But do you feel that there could be an agreement among G20 countries as well that will facilitate travel and then, of course, even commerce and trade, and it will be a huge boost if that sort of an outcome could be achieved?
The global health governance is on the agenda of G20.
Yes.
And
the entire architecture.
It is clear that WHO has not really served the purpose well, because every country is having its own policy regarding vaccination, regarding quarantine, regarding entry and exit from their countries, and there should be some kind of uniformity. So all that WHO has not been able to do, so perhaps G20 has to take the lead.
Right. And in terms of, again, climate, R.R. Rashmi, in how every country is responding, it has been different. Net zero is a different objective, but India so far has had a stellar role as far as its NDCs are concerned. Do you think there is scope for India to commit more as far as that particular aspect of, energy transition and mitigation of this climate change is concerned?
Well, as far as NDC enhancement is concerned, there is certainly a room for improvement, but I'm not sure if the India's, the Prime Minister himself or India's negotiators are going to commit to that straight away. It's a part of it.
It will be a negotiation too.
And these issues have to be negotiated.
Yes.
But what is certainly important is that the track record of India is extremely positive on this. And PM has made announcements on global platforms that India will enhance its renewable energy target to 450 gigawatts.
Yes.
Currently, the NDCs have a target of only 20,000. Later on, the electricity plan of the country revised it to 225 gigawatts. So from 225, if you include original target of 175, then 225, then to 450, this itself is a major transition. So it has already, it's in the public domain, so I'm sure everybody realizes that India has substantially raised its ambition. Whether it is a part of NDC or not doesn't matter, but it is there on the global platform, and it's a commitment made to the international community. But for achieving this, of course, there are resources and technologies needed. You must have noticed that Prime Minister has also been talking about recently about the One World, One Sun grid,
Yes.
the global grid. And that's a remarkable concept which he has come out with, that in case those countries which are not able to meet their energy needs within their own domestic energy system, they can borrow through transmission networks. So energy can be produced anywhere, but it can be taken in anywhere else through a global network, and that would reduce the cost of energy and facilitate the energy consumption growth, and while meeting the requirements sustainably without damaging the environment.
Yes, joint statement
also
expected.
talking about hydrogen mission. National hydrogen mission has been announced. That's another clean energy initiative. So I hope these technology issues, these technological transformation platforms also get created, and I'm sure PM will be very concerned about this, and he will take it up seriously.
Well, certainly, there is a joint statement expected on the One World, One World, One Grid initiative, and we're all looking forward to that too. And let's see what emerges from these two major international events that the PM will be part of. I thank you for now for joining us to talk about it this evening. Now, climate change with extreme weather events remain a burgeoning challenge as we get closer to the date for COP26 to commence, be it melting glaciers in Switzerland, hail and floods in parts of Australia, or the violent volcanic eruptions in Spain's La Palma Island. Fire and smoke from the Cumbre Vieja may be easing, and there's also respite for people in Italy from a rare tropical storm, but people are still looking for solutions world over to the vagaries of nature.
There is still no respite for the people on Spain's La Palma Island, where Cumbre Vieja volcano continues to throw plumes of red-hot lava and ash into the sky. Now a volcanologist with Spain's National Geographic Institute has said that the activity is likely to increase inside La Palma's exclusion zone. However, the lava flows are likely to remain in the area of the previous lava flows and are unlikely to reach the sea. Amid this, the volcano continues to erupt even as it has entered the second month of eruption. On Thursday, the volcano spurted out more lava and smoke. Lava from the volcano has covered nearly 900 hectares of land, destroying 2,000 buildings and many banana plantations since the eruption started on September 19. Over 7,000 people have evacuated their homes so far. While La Palma continues to burn, some respite has come for the residents of Italy after a rare tropical storm-like cyclone Medicane swept through the southern part of the country. People in Catania sought to repair damage reaped by the violent storm. As torrential rain stopped, shop owners sought to dry out their businesses after widespread flooding swamped the Sicilian town on Tuesday, turning streets into rivers. At least 2 people have died and 1 person still missing since the storm first hit over the weekend. Schools in the town have been closed and traffic restrictions have been implemented. Public parks and open-air sports facilities are also closed. But the worries are not all over. Weather experts warned the storm was expected to hit once again. In Australia too, floodwater mixed with hail flowed in the streets of the South Australian town of Tanunda on Thursday. A video doing rounds of social media showed water seeping into a local charity shop as rain continued to fall outside. Another video showed a hailstorm in the South Australian state capital of Adelaide, with local residents describing damage to vehicles. Videos shared on social media showed hail pelting windscreens and people seeking shelter. The Australian Bureau of Meteorology has cancelled a severe thunderstorm warning for Adelaide, but it remains in place for northeastern parts of the state with thunderstorms and hail in the forecast. Amid this, climate change is an issue that remains unresolved. While there has been an increase in the natural catastrophes across the world, environmentalists are concerned over melting glaciers in Switzerland. Glaciers in Switzerland are shrinking rapidly in response to ongoing climate change, a report by the new Swiss Glacier Inventory has said. More than 500 Swiss glaciers have already vanished, and the government said in 2019 that 90% of the remaining 1,500 will go by the end of the century if nothing is done to cut the emissions. All this when the United Nations Weather Agency has warned that the greenhouse gas emissions have hit a record high in 2020. The UN World Meteorological Organization has also warned that the current commitments to cut greenhouse gas emissions put the planet on track for an average 2.7 degrees Celsius temperature rise this century. Curbing greenhouse gas emissions is one of the top agendas for world leaders, who are all set to meet at COP26 Summit, which will be held in Glasgow from October 31st to November 12th this year. World Today Desk, DD India.
Now, away from these concerns, the World Bank has halted disbursements for operations in Sudan on Wednesday in response to the military seizure of power from a transitional government. World Bank President David Malpass in a statement said the World Bank paused disbursements in all of its operations in Sudan on Monday, and it has stopped processing any new operations as we closely monitor and assess the situation. This was the latest blow to the impoverished African nation. Earlier, the US also suspended aid to the country. The World Bank and IMF in June granted Sudan debt relief under the Heavily Indebted Poor Countries Initiative, cutting the nation's debt in half to about $28 billion, and the institutions have offered additional help if economic reforms continue. In the meantime, thousands of people have been taking to the streets since Monday's coup led by Armed Forces Chief General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan. State oil company workers, doctors and pilots also joined civilian groups opposing the takeover. So far, at least 10 people have been killed in clashes with security forces. Meanwhile, Sudan State TV late on Wednesday reported that Burhan had relieved 6 Sudanese ambassadors from their posts, apparently because they rejected the military takeover. The 6 were envoys to the US, the European Union, China, Qatar, France and the head of the mission in Geneva. Some quick-fire sports news now, and first from the world of football. Well, Barcelona sacked coach Ronald Koeman after Wednesday's 1-0 La Liga defeat at Rayo Vallecano. Barcelona are 9th in La Liga on 15 points from 10 games, 6 points behind leaders Real Madrid, who beat them 2-1 at the Camp Nou on Sunday. They're 3rd in their Champions League group with 3 points from 3 matches after suffering 3-0 defeats in their opening 2 games against Bayern Munich and Benfica. Barcelona are 5-time European champions, and the results marked the first time in the club's history that they had failed to score in their opening 2 European games. Koeman, who spent 6 years with Barca as a player, was brought back to the club in August 2020 by former president Josep Maria Bartomeu. New chief Juan Laporta, however, frequently made it clear that the Dutchman was not his appointment. The duo had an uneasy relationship, with Koeman last month releasing a statement calling for him to be given time to rebuild after losing Lionel Messi and Antoine Griezmann in the transfer window. However, that wish was not granted, and the club will now seek a replacement for the 58-year-old. Local media reports suggest that former midfielder Xavi Hernandez, who is currently in charge of Al Sadd in Qatar, and Belgium coach Roberto Martinez are the frontrunners for the role. Now, holders Manchester City were knocked out of the AFL Cup after West Ham United won 5-3 on penalties in front of an ecstatic sellout crowd at London Stadium. The 4th round tie had ended goalless after 90 minutes before Syed Birama scored the decisive spot kick. Phil Foden fired his penalty wide to give the Hammers the advantage in the shootout. It's the first time since 2016 that City, who have won the competition for the past 4 seasons, have been eliminated. Pep Guardiola made 9 changes to his side, but City finished the 90 minutes with substitutes Foden, Gabriel Jesus and Jack Grealish on the pitch as they search for a winner in normal time. And second half goals from Takumi Minamino and Divock Origi secured Liverpool's place in the AFL Cup quarter-finals. Japan striker Minamino, who scored twice in his side's 3-0 win over Norwich City in the previous round, finished neatly from Neco Williams' cross to end the championship outfit's stubborn resistance after 62 minutes. Origi, who also netted in the previous round, then produced a brilliant impoverished finish with his heel to put the result beyond doubt with 6 minutes remaining. Jurgen Klopp named an entirely different Liverpool side to the one which thrashed Manchester United 5-0 on Sunday, and despite dominating possession for long periods, it was Preston who fashioned the best first half opportunities. Real Madrid went top of La Liga on goal difference after a goalless draw with Osasuna. Real Madrid is one of the 4 teams on 21 points alongside Sevilla, Real Betis and Real Sociedad. 6th placed Osasuna, who are only 2 points off top, had the best chance of the game when John Moncayola hit the post from close range. This was Osasuna's first point at Bernabeu since 2005, ending a run of 11 Real wins in the fixture. The 4-way leaders are 3 points above champions Atletico Madrid and 6 points above Barca, who lost 1-0 to Rayo Vallecano. And in news that just came in a short while back related to badminton, India will host 3 back-to-back badminton tournaments, including a new event, the Odisha Open, in January next year, according to the international calendar unveiled by the sports governing body Badminton World Federation on Thursday. The India Open Super 500, which was cancelled in 2020 as well as this year due to the COVID-19 pandemic, will be the first tournament of 2022 scheduled from the 11th of January till the 16th. The Syed Modi International Super 300, which was also cancelled by the BWF for the 2nd year in a row in September, will be held from the 18th to the 23rd of January. Now, this will be followed by the Odisha Super 100, which will be played from the 25th to the 30th of January. The Hyderabad Open Super 100 tournament, which was also cancelled in 2020 as well as this year, does not feature in the calendar for 2022. The world body added that it is still discussing whether additional Super 100 tournaments will be added to the revamped calendar. Let's now get you news with a difference that is all beyond the headlines. Take a look.
Khadi Designer Award Ceremony and Fashion Show was organized on Tuesday. Dresses of 10 young fashion designers selected from across the country through the All India Khadi Designer Competition were displayed during the fashion show, among which 3 top designers were awarded in an attempt to promote and publicize Khadi. The fashion show was organized by Khadi and Village Industries Commission. A pet store owner in South Korea baked a Squid Game themed dog treat. Dalgona candy coffins with ribbons and pink guards wearing masks were among some of the new treats to get into the Halloween spirit. Lee Jin-sun, who runs a cooking studio for dog food in Seoul, says this year she decided to open a special baking class for Squid Game fans. Lee and her student Hwang Hue-won made the homemade style cookies with rice powder, beetroot, coconut, carob powder, eggs and olive oil. After a journey by truck and then being carried in stretchers or on people's backs, a group of 150 vicunas arrived to a repopulating center in Peru's Cusco. Peruvian authorities have established a conservationist project meant to recover and conserve wild fauna, specifically to improve the sustainable management of the vicuna in the Cusco region. Vicunas were successfully transported from the Cerro Azul Association in the Canchis province to Urubamba authorities. Hope that the vicunas will not only become a tourist attraction but that locals will use their wool to create handicrafts as well. Traces of a large building were recently discovered in the South Korean city Iksan, that is home to the twin tombs where Baekje monarchs were buried. The holes were presumably dug out for wooden pillars. Right next to them, there's believed to have been a drain to prevent flooding. Archaeologists believe the site was home to 2 structures measuring 30 meters long and 10 meters wide. In Singapore, a group of scientists from the National University of Singapore are using Lego pieces to help save coral reefs in the country. The group puts Lego pieces with coral into water. Now, more coral and Lego are being grown in an aquarium before being put back into the sea. Singapore is home to a third of the world's coral reefs. That is staggering in the tiny country. Coral reefs protect the world's coastlines, are home to thousands of fishes and are a vital part of the underwater ecosystem. However, issues like land reclamation and coastal development have caused Singapore's reefs to deplete over the decades. As Thailand prepares to reopen the country, guidelines are being prepared to allow visitors from Thailand's neighboring countries such as Laos, Myanmar and Malaysia to take one-day trips there. Thailand's Ministry of Health is working with the Ministry of Tourism and Sports to prepare guidelines to allow visitors from Thailand's neighboring countries such as Laos, Myanmar and Malaysia. Tourists crossing the Thai-Myanmar border will be able to visit Tak Province. Vietnam's Ho Chi Minh City has restarted its first water tour to Can Gio. The service is part of the plan to restore the tourism industry under the conditions of safe adaptation to COVID-19 from now until 2022. 50 Vietnamese and foreign tourists from the city of Ho Chi Minh took part in the day tour, which departed from Bac Dang Wharf for Can Gio by speedboat. The tour has resumed serving tourists after several months of suspension due to the pandemic. A drone footage shows some of the key sites around the Mont Blanc Massif, which spans France, Italy and Switzerland. The footage showcases melting glaciers of Mont Blanc ahead of the key environment summit COP26. In a few places can be seen the ravages of climate change, as starkly as on the flanks of Europe's largest mountain, the Mont Blanc, where glaciers have been melting at a record rate.
And now let's take a look at all the events that took place on this day in history around the world today on the 28th of October.
In 1919, on this day, the World State Prohibition Act was passed by the US Congress. It prohibited the sale of drinks containing more than 0.5% of alcohol. On this day in the year 1995, 289 people died and 270 were injured when a crowded underground railway train caught fire in Azerbaijan's capital Baku. In 1999, on the same day, Luis Alfredo Garavito, known as Goofy, confessed to killing some 140 children during a 7-year orgy of bloodshed in Colombia's biggest ever serial murder case. On the same day in the year 2009, NASA launched the Ares-1X rocket. In 2011, on this day, India hosted its maiden Formula 1 race. World Today Desk, DD India.
And now it's time to motor out from the office for me and my team because that's a wrap on World Today. But all the latest will continue right here on DD India, including tracking of the Prime Minister's visit first to Italy and then to the UK in Glasgow for COP26. He leaves tonight, so stay tuned for that.